What are your opinions on what it would take for homes to start depreciating in value?
So that's a really great question, right? So there's a few things that can happen. First, demand has to be lower than the supply that we have, right? Which is probably not going to happen anytime soon. What happened after 2008 and 9, builders stopped building because financing was so tough for them to get. As rates increased for single family homes, builders, commercial loans were much higher. So, they retreated, and they've retreated for 10 years. So that snowball effect has really wound up to where we're at now, where we're really behind by millions of housing units, right? And if we look at it nationally too, there are some areas that will have more building than we can here in New England, right? Yeah. So the South, can take advantage of large projects.
So we just don't have that much land, right?
We don't have the land, right? And we've been built up in the early 2000s in most of the communities around here. So a supply change is going to need to happen, right? Where supply outweighs demand. Very difficult for us.
Millions of houses, you're saying,
millions
right?
of houses,
and that's like a yearly thing.
Exactly.
How do you sell millions of extra houses here? We just don't even have them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, look, we sell around 5 million homes nationally, and we need quite a bit more to satisfy demand. Wow. So let's talk about the government involvement. The Fed can increase rates and make things more affordable. With the run-up that we've had over the last 5 years, 10 years really, of appreciation, we really have to watch affordability for people, right? So
huge issue, yeah.
We've had double-digit appreciation in values for multiple years here, right? When I got into the business, and you as well, 3, 4, 5% appreciation was considered a great year. Yeah. In the last few years, we've had 12, 14, 16%, 20% in some communities, right?
In 2021, probably.
So at some point, affordability is going to outweigh the increase in wages.
I think it's already. Really.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So, for the first time, there's reports saying that it's more expensive to own than rent. Right. So that has bearing on what's happening in the marketplace. So I don't see homes depreciating around here at any point soon. Yeah. We certainly have an inventory issue. That is something that we're not going to solve overnight. Yeah. Builders need to really increase the number of units that they're building. Boomers have to let go of some of their property and try to find a place to go, which I think is going to be really difficult, right? Yeah. Millennials are more and more getting into the marketplace. It's just a tidal wave of demand that's happening. Yeah. That's the big thing. Yeah. Certainly the government involvement is another thing, right? So as the Fed raises interest rates, it becomes less affordable. I don't think that rates are going to rise to a level that's really going to outpace wages, right? Because that's not good for the economy, right? So more and more people are going to be able to afford. At this point in time, the only way out of it really is just building, right? And being creative. Yeah. And all communities, all municipalities need to look at, ways that they can keep people in their municipalities. Yeah. Otherwise, places like New England are going to lose people to the South. Yeah. They're going to lose people to the Midwest, right? Who you can build an affordable home for $300,000, $400,000, right? Which is below the median sales price. You can't even get a 2-bedroom condo around here for exactly,
that, right?
And that's the issue. And how can you be at early 20s, mid 20s trying to buy something, and being able to afford $800,000-$900,000?
Oh yeah, and it's like I think the building issue is a huge thing too, because even though they are building, I think, more homes now than they have the last couple of years, they're just not affordable for the average person.
That's right.
Like in Westford, the average new construction is like $1.5 million.
That's right.
That's wild to me.
So you have land acquisition values that keep increasing every year. As prices for homes go up, so doesn't the value of land, right? So builders have to buy these parcels of land, and then building requirements, building regulations keep increasing, right?
So they're spending more money to build these houses.
They're spending more money to build the houses.
And they still need to make money, right?
And they're in the business to make money, right? They're not volunteers, right? They need a profit margin, right? And the only way to recoup that profit is to build a product at a level that you build in a margin.
Right. And we do have people who, like a lot of our area, we have people coming from the city who have like young families that want to raise their kids in the suburbs now, right? But they still need to commute to the city. Right. And those are the people who are they have really good salaries, right? Yep. Like doctors, engineers, lawyers, they're making $300,000+ a year. And for them to come here, pay $1.5 million. They're like, no problem. I had a condo there for that. Right. So those are the people who, I mean, no offense, are screwing up our area because they don't mind paying those prices. Because anyone else who grew up in this area, we see like 1.5 and we're like, what? Like, who makes that money? Right? Like, that's wild to me. So and it's caused a lot of my friends to get pushed out further, right? Like, they just can't afford to live in the area they grew up in anymore. They can't afford to bring their family back to the area they grew up in anymore. And now they're moving out like 30, 40 minutes plus further, or they're moving to out of state because it's just not affordable. Like,
it's just the whole trickle down effect, right? So you look at, like, if I grew up in Cambridge or Chestnut Hill, certainly, it would be very difficult to find a starter home, if you could find one, and afford to be able to stay in that community, right? And you're exactly right. So what happens is from the big metros, people move out to the suburbs. From the suburbs, you move out west, and from out west, you actually start to think about moving to other states.
Right. And then so, like, funny story is, I ran into this like older couple at this bar a couple weeks ago with my boyfriend, and they were lovely and so much fun to talk to. And they're like, times were hard when we were growing up and raising kids. And I'm like, tell me more about this, right? And they're like, we bought our house for $16,000. And I'm like, how much is it worth now? They're like, probably over $1 million. I'm like, times are tough, right? My generation, we're making as much money as we possibly can, saving pennies and overpaying for groceries and everything else, and we are buying starter homes for $1 million.
Yes,
like
on two incomes.
On two incomes.
Back then, it was one income.
Right, exactly. Like she stayed home and raised her kids while her husband went and grew the business. So it's just like, again, it's a different heart. He probably made $30,000 a year at that time, and a $16,000 house was a lot to them. Yes. And they had like 17% interest rate back then too, right? Which is even more wild. Sure. But, and we talk about, that brings me back to the interest rates. People keep saying like, interest rates are so high right now. Yeah. And I keep explaining to people, like, they're high compared to like what you're vaguely remembering in the near future, right? Or in the past, past future. And it is, the national average is probably around 7%, right? And that's like over the last 20 plus years.
Exactly.
So to have 6.5% to high 6% right now, it's average,
an average,
right?
It's an average rate, exactly.
And I don't personally see in our lifetime ever seen interest rates go back down to like 3%.
Yeah.
It just don't.
So yeah, it's a great point. Look, if you asked me when I got into the business, would we see 2% rates, 3%? I'd say no way.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody ever thought, we'd get to that place. It could be a once in a lifetime situation, right? I mean, for us to get back to that point, I mean, we would have to see, the recession word come in, and a lot of people are upset of the Fed, interfering and raising rates and making things less affordable. But my opinion is that they had to, right? Absolutely. The economy was overheating. Slow
down the appreciation.
Totally overheating. In the summer of 2021, it was almost impossible to buy a home. Yeah.